Hey guys, it's Sam. Thanks for checking out the channel. Sam Adonis is a different Sam who's been making a lot of waves. Sam Adonis and his brother Corey Graves got signed to WWE Developmental around the same time, but both took very different paths. While Corey Graves became the voice of Monday Night Raw, Sam Adonis got released from WWE Developmental, ended up going over and wrestling in the UK for several years, went over to Mexico, made controversial waves so big they splashed the coasts of the United States of America. He's now here in the US wrestling for MLW. And more specifically, he's talking about all of that with me on Notsam Wrestling. Here's my interview with Sam Adonis. For the first time here in the Notsam studio, ladies and gentlemen, he's a professional wrestler who's about as well-traveled as anybody you can imagine. He's a veteran, and he's a big fan, which I love. Ladies and gentlemen, Sam Adonis is here. What's going on, man?
I am just absolutely over the moon to be here with you. Thank you for the invite.
I also love having another Sam on. I feel like this is the least accurate Notsam Wrestling show that's ever happened.
For sure. And not only that, you have another toy nerd here with you. So
that got me pretty pumped because, you know, and that was kind of what I was wondering, right? Because I see you and a lot of the Zoom interviews and stuff that you do. I've seen your setup at home, and you've got the big shelf behind you with all the different like figures and championships and merch and just stuff that like reeks wrestling fan. So as somebody, I mean, you've been going for what, 14 years?
Yeah, it'll be 15. It'll be 15 years in February.
So 15 years in, how do you maintain fandom?
Oh, it's absolutely difficult at this point. Honestly, the thing that interests me the most is obscurities. I'm to the point now where I've been through so many of the wrestling lore and all the normal stuff that everybody's seen, whether it's watching old tapes or just stuff you have in the collection. Now I almost kind of look at it like being a wine connoisseur. You're kind of past the normal stuff, past the Canyon Ridge or whatever the cheap stuff at Walmart is. You want to get into the good stuff. So as far as my personal collection, it's just rare items that I like it to be a conversation piece. I would like if you were to come to my house, you say, "Wow, I've never seen this." So a lot of that is just spontaneous decisions, seeing something I've never seen before, or if I can find a decent deal. I don't say I don't collect. There's not, there's parameters around a collection.
Right.
I just kind of, grab what I see and what I like at the time.
So no rules, no logic.
Not really any rules or logic, just, stuff that's sentimental to me, whether it's my career personally. I have some of the Arena Mexico posters that were hanging outside Arena Mexico on my wall, a giant poster from Italy. And then, my toy collection, if you will, it's more of my favorite wrestlers, the Hayabusas, Kenta Kobashis, Onita, like we just talked about. So.
Yeah, and do you so after I would say a long weekend, but sometimes it could be a week, a month, when you're on the road for those stretches and you come home and you're like, and you can finally just stop. Clearly you can never turn off wrestling because the minute you walk into your place, there's all your wrestling stuff. Does that sort of center you and go like, yeah, this is why I'm doing all this?
I don't know. I almost feel like, I think enough people around this now that it almost, and it's not just professional wrestling, it's any profession or any, hobby. You almost kind of have to be completely consumed and ate up by it to actually succeed.
Yeah.
If we played by the rules and did what we're supposed to do or what would logically make any sense,
right.
Most of us wouldn't get past year 1 or 2. You kind of go against the grain and what your body and your brain is telling you. This is something I grew up around. My dad was a promoter. My brother's Corey Graves from WWE. I've been around it so long that whether I want to be around it or not, it's a part of my subconscious.
See, when they told me Sam Adonis, he's got a wrestling family, I figured you mean his dad, Adrian. And
every once in a while, I still get people at shows come up to me cleverly and they're, hey, I know who you are. I know who your family is. And I'm like, okay, here we go. Yeah, cool. You watch Raw. Yeah. Adrian, that's your dad, right? If I'm drawing any sort of comparison like that, I'm through the roof. I'm so excited about it.
When you decided to start going by Sam Adonis, was there any sort of Adrian Adonis influence, or was it just, I'm an Adonis whose name is Sam.
It was actually not my decision to be Sam Adonis. A funny story. I wrestled as Sam Elias, which is my first and middle name.
Huh.
That was my independent name. And then once I was released by WWE in 2012, where I had my little cup of coffee in FCW, I went to the UK and worked for Brian Dixon, which was Europe's #1 longest running wrestling promotion. And the boss says, "What's your wrestling name?" I said, Sam Elias. He goes, "Oh, Sam Adonis." Yes, sir. It worked. It stuck. I got to the point where I became much more well known as that than Sam Elias. But the funny thing is, Adrian Adonis is probably one of my favorite performers ever to watch.
Right.
I always am fascinated by the big guys that can move, and some of those ridiculous bumps with Jimmy Hart over the top rope were just,
Well, yeah, I mean, Adrian Adonis is incredible because it's like he made his bones as this like in shape guy. And as he got overweight, like his wrestling style didn't really change.
Exactly. And I think that's something, it's a lot of the legends are able to, maintain that level of performance. I say the same about Dick Murdoch, even Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah.
A younger age, they were competing at a little bit faster pace, but you never forget how to ride the bike.
Yeah.
You see these guys moving, and I mean, Adrian Adonis is one of the best. Dick Murdoch, his tag partner. These are the guys that as a fat kid I idolized because they were able to just put on such a high level of performance. And then, I kind of went the other way with it, lost a little bit of the pudge around the waist, but I still just, aspire to be half as good as some of these guys one day.
Yeah, it's dangerous, though, because I've definitely heard guys on the independents that are maybe not in the best shape going like, well, Dusty got over. Yeah. And I'm like, dude, you're not. No.
Honestly, I mean, I am definitely in the best shape of my life now.
Yeah.
I had a WWE contract when I was about maybe 260 pounds. So
what are you at now?
I'm probably about 235 right now.
Okay.
I stay away from the scale as much as possible.
Yeah.
But
you look trim for what it's worth.
Completely different to what it used to be. I would advise anybody to Google the name Buddy Stetcher, which was my name when I was under contract with WWE. And you'll see a picture and you will not be able to tell it's the same person.
Wow. So
I pride myself on that fact. And again, it's, I was released and I kind of had to get back up on the horse and work harder to get back into that position. But, if you see the night and day difference, I definitely hang my hat on it.
Well, it's probably, it doesn't sound like maybe when you're you would have had to have been in your early 20s when you got the FCW contract. Is that right?
I was signed when I was 21 years old. Okay. And I was released 3 days after my brother got the phone call to get the job.
Oh, that's got to feel good.
It was bittersweet because, I was way too immature to be there. It wasn't my time. I think, a good wrestler is, you need to take time to marinate and become what you need to become. 21 years old, very few people, are able to survive in that atmosphere. Yeah. It just wasn't my time. But for 3 days, literally, I was excited. Oh my gosh, things are going to change. Now my partner's coming. My brother's going to help make sure, we're on the same page. Friday afternoon, get the phone call. Hey, Sam, wish you the best in your future endeavors.
Yeah. Only one Adonis allowed.
Exactly for now. So
wow. And was that that had to be complicated in the moment? I would imagine that your brother was not able to publicly enjoy with you his good fortune while you were kind of dealing with the fact that you had to figure out what your life was going to look like now.
It was just a really complicated situation. I had lived at home with my parents at the time, and I was just going to college to become a cop. Mm-hmm. And literally out of nowhere came the contract. I moved to Florida. I'm a single guy living by myself in Tampa, Florida, having a good time. So there was never really much stability there as it was. I think that might have, set me back in the first place. Mm-hmm. But again, going back to the sickness that is professional wrestling, there was never, an hour or 10 minutes where you weren't going to get back up on the horse. I was always the kind of guy where I knew that I had left a lot undone, mainly being Japan and Mexico and the United Kingdom. And since then, I think my career has kind of progressed the way it should have before the contract. And now I like to think that the best days are still yet to come.
Well, yeah, I think it's a good takeaway for all parties involved in that situation, because I'm sure your brother did not think to himself, yeah, I'm going to get this contract to be become really well known as a commentator.
Sure, right.
And I'm sure you didn't go, yeah, and I'm going to be really well known as a superstar in AAA and CMLL.
Oh, exactly.
Like, that's not, you don't know. Like, you have no idea where these paths are going to lead you.
It's funny to me too, though, because at the time, I mean, and I was there in 2012, so a lot of the top guys now, Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns was there. A lot of these guys that are in their prime right now were my kind of upperclassmen, if you will. And I don't think any one of them would logically be able to look you in the eye and say, Sam's not going to, he's not going away. I was that ashamed of my time there that it just wasn't ready to be there. And everybody would say that was an accident. That kid didn't mean to get signed. I think they would all paint that picture to you. But then, you fast forward a little bit and I look at how many of the guys that were my upperclassmen would literally message me when they got their release and say, hey, Sam, I'm a free agent now. How do I get to Mexico? Who do I contact in England? What do I do to get to Japan? So, I kind of took it the other way. And again, it all stems back to that sickness. It's not that we want it. It's not that we deserve it. It's that we need it to survive. And pro wrestling is literally in my blood. And it's, there's nowhere else I'd rather be.
Yeah, that's what it is, right? The only thing worse than being a pro wrestler is not being a pro wrestler. So you're kind of out of options. So, how did you get? First of all, how did you get the weight off? Like, did you go like, okay, you get the release and you go, I got to figure out what my life is going to be going forward, and did you have like a come to Jesus and go, I got to get myself in shape, like this is all on me now?
More or less. So when I got there, I ended up dropping a little bit of weight in a good way. And then I had a knee surgery, which kind of put some weight back on. And, things just kind of, went downhill from there, which led to the release. But once the pressure was off, it almost felt like everything was, going to be okay. I was so excited to get the opportunity to wrestle in the United Kingdom. I was actually hooked up by William Regal, who was a good friend of mine while I was there, one of the best coaches I've ever worked under. But he made it all happen. And then it happened within, I think, 6 weeks. 6 weeks after my release,
that quick.
I was in London, or in Liverpool, I should say. And we were wrestling, 6, sometimes 7 nights a week. Upwards of 10 matches per week. So to go from, just an FCW training regimen where you're, working out 5 days a week and maybe a show, to being back in the ring, to being the featured American on the show that's been given the time to, to be showcased, that's kind of a confidence booster. It was the perfect storm to lift me back up and make me feel better about, where I was. And that, eventually just evolved over time. And I would say that, I learned who I was as a professional wrestler in that atmosphere because, just like any walk of life, there's no substitute for experience. And, going to having 50 to 60 matches in a 2-month period in the UK at that time with these guys that have been doing it for 20 years is only going to make a performer better.
It's really interesting, though, that your dad promoted shows, because I think that would give you kind of an immediate insight into wrestling that nobody really comes up with. Like, most of us as kids, like, we loved wrestling, but like, we all have different roads to how we find out about Japan and Mexico and the independence and stuff like that. And really, none of us until we're significantly older really figure out the kind of business side of it, especially then. That there had to be some kind of comfort, I would imagine, when you go, I know that wrestling exists on an independent level because as a child, this is what I saw. This was family business.
It honestly, I was kind of a brat. I was, maybe entitled, maybe spoiled, but I was such a wrestling geek and just the hours of tapes and just magazine reading. I was studied up so much that I almost kind of like, I wore it as a badge of honor. The wrestlers used to ask me my opinion of their matches, and I would, say, that wasn't very good. Oh, shut up, kid. You don't know anything. But I knew my stuff at the time.
Yeah.
I don't think any of those same wrestlers would tell you that I'd become a wrestler myself. They would all have told you, oh, he's going to be a referee or a promoter or something, because they knew that, how much I loved the business and how passionate I was for it. And, everything just kind of went the way that it did. I ended up just, excelling in the ring and just, it's all about the work you were willing to put in.
So you're saying that they knew you would be in wrestling, but they didn't necessarily see the potential in you as a wrestler?
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Even before the time in FCW, I was, I graduated high school about 295 pounds.
Wow.
So the biggest I ever was before I wrestled.
Yeah.
So I was able to, my brother was the one that trained me, and it was just one of those things that, like, maybe I was too foolish to see it, but I wasn't going to be told no. And I kept pushing harder and pushing harder. I'm blessed to be 6'4" and, big in stature at this point.
Yeah.
Now that frame came in handy, because now, especially in, today's wrestling, I'm a little bit more on the bigger side.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely it's been an amazing ride, and being around that and seeing it and learning it from the ground up, and just the amount of time spent with my brother. When he was doing shows in the ECW arena at 3PW, we'd do Ring of Honor in Dayton. On any Friday night of the year, I would get in the car with him and just, follow him.
Right.
And just travel and meet the guys and just study and try to understand what makes each town the way that they are, and just, what makes the clock tick. And, there's not one thing I could point out that said, this is the reason why, I've been able to do what I've done. There's a million reasons like that. It seems like the perfect storm of everything kind of, lining up.
And were you and your brother like the same type of fan growing up? Like, would you guys watch tapes together? Were you both obsessed with it, or was it?
I would say he was more in the moment with, like, a lot of the 80s stuff, because I was born in 89, but he had a lot of the LJN wrestling toys, and we had a lot of the Coliseum videos. And I think probably I just, my dad and my brother liked wrestling, and I needed to get in on that. So I always wanted to play with the toys. I would always have the videos on, and I always felt like there was something else out there that I haven't seen. So we used to go to the video store, and I'd rent more Coliseum videos, or, hey, here's a Clash of the Champions. And it was just, I couldn't get enough of it. I didn't know why. I didn't know what I liked about it. There wasn't one style of match I enjoyed. I just needed more of it.
Yeah.
And ultimately that led to, our discovery of ECW, which, I was 7 years old. My dad, my brother.
By the way, I can't, because I'm older than you. I can't imagine. I discovered ECW probably, I don't know, I must have been 13 or 14. I can't imagine being 7 years old and hearing "The night, come on, I want to lay a dance atop the ECW arena."
It's funny because my brother would have been 12, and my dad took us to the Golden Dome in Pittsburgh. We've been there for many shows, but I remember going, and I was kind of scared going into the place. It was just a different type atmosphere than what I was used to. And I remember walking in there. My brother insisted on a Raven t-shirt.
Nice.
My dad entertained that. And I got the Beulah t-shirt. But because this is 1997 ECW.
Yeah.
The smallest size they had, I think, was a large.
Sure.
So I had the Beulah McGillicuddy t-shirt that was down to my ankles. And that was my t-shirt purchase for the night. So I think my brother might still have that shirt. But man, those were the days. That was a lot of fun back then.
Yeah, I couldn't convince my parents. Like, I'd sit there and I'd tape the shows, and I'd the infomercials would come on, with the t-shirts.
Extreme Warfare Volume 2.
Everything. But I couldn't convince them that I needed an ECFNW shirt, because they were like, "We know what FN stands for. You're not going to wear an FN shirt."
It's funny. I tell the story all the time about November to Remember 97. This is at the Golden Dome. This is when Shane Douglas beat Bam Bam Bigelow for the title. My mom was at that one. My mom, my sister, my brother, and my dad, we all went. And I remember vividly, we were hard cam side, watching right about where the camera was. And I remember, seeing my mom go crazy when Shane won. And my mom was not the biggest fan. She knows about it. It's just like, in her peripherals at all the given time. She knows about wrestling. She probably knows more about Japanese wrestling than most, young fans do today.
Is that because of you?
Yeah,
or,
just because, my mom is a saint, one of the amazing person. But she never got wrapped up and involved in the cheering side of it, and marking out, if you will. I remember vividly Shane pinning Bam Bam and Mom jumping up and tears of joy in her eyes. The Pittsburgh boy wins the title, and it was a great night.
Yeah, that sounds like a great night. Yeah, I vividly remember a Mother's Day when I was in high school. My mom and I she walked into my room. I was watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre on VHS. And she just sat down and watched it with me. And it's one of those things where you shouldn't have this information.
Right.
But you're a good mom.
Exactly.
So now you have this information. So did you, when you're a kid and you're you've fallen in love with this thing initially to keep up with the Joneses, but now this becomes your thing, was it always going to be I'm just going to follow this for my life. I don't know what I'm going to do, or did you not know?
Well, it's weird because there's always been subconsciously something in my brain saying that like you could almost put it along the lines of positive thought, or self-coaching or whatever you want to call it. But there's never been a day where I've wanted to be a pro wrestler. I've always known I will be a pro wrestler. There was never a question. It was just what's going to happen. And I had to juggle life around it. It was like, okay, well, I got to get my grades up. Or I got to shoot. Well, I might as well go to college. I should be a cop. It was always, don't worry, it's going to be fine. One day I'm going to, be a pro wrestler. And finally now, it wasn't when I, first signed that initial contract. It's now that I can finally look back and say, oh my gosh, I kind of did exactly what I wanted to do.
You did it.
And it's a pretty amazing feeling.
Yeah. So you're at FCW, you go over to the UK, and that's got to be a tremendous, not just like wrestling education, but cultural education. Because now you're getting to know the audiences, you're eating at different places, you're living in different places. It's like you're getting to know this culture outside of the United States, as well as learning this new style of wrestling and how different international audiences take in wrestling and kind of expand that palette. How long did that last?
I ended up spending the better part of 4 years in All-Star Wrestling. So when I was living in Liverpool, for our slower months, I would basically try to find work throughout Europe. And this was also just opening the gates of culture to me, just being able to do it. But there'd be time where I'd be so broke that I had to make sure that I got into London for that flight tomorrow, or I don't get paid, which means I don't get food this week, or I don't even get back from London on Sunday. So it taught me punctuality. It taught me being there on time. If 20 minutes early is on time.
Yeah.
So I'd have to do some of these shows. I've met some of the greatest people on the planet. I've had so much fun. The food, the culture, everything about it. Spending time in Europe, it really kind of opened your eyes to how big the world is. I've been pretty vocal about saying that the beauty of professional wrestling in my eyes is how different it is from city to city. Mm-hmm. Every single city has a different fan because you need to understand what makes that fan tick. Yeah. And you can go back to the territory days. The Florida territory might have been a little bit more slower, relaxed. Hey, let's sit here for 3 hours and watch the wrestling. So you don't mind having a methodical, mat-based style wrestling match like Jack Briscoe and Dory Funk. Whereas Southwest, the Blanchards, you might have a Bruiser Brody against the sheep herders because some cattleman that was just out this morning cut his hand on the barbed wire and he's not going to buy a figure 4 leg lock. He wants to see blood. Right. That goes so much more deep than anybody can even realize until you see it firsthand. Each British city has their quirks. The North is different than the South. Italy likes this. Germany was my favorite. I absolutely loved wrestling.
Why is that?
Germany was, I wrestled in Hanover, Germany 5 times. And this was where, Otto Vance and the CWA.
Of course, yeah.
This would be the company that was like the tail end of that. A guy named Christian Eckstein, EWP it was called. And this was the only place I've ever been where wrestling was the coolest thing to do in town that night. And I would say, I was kind of equated to red carpet wrestling. You walk into the building, it only held about 600 people. But there would be this parade at the beginning of the show where all the wrestlers come out all dressed up in your entrance gears and everything like that. You go stand in the middle of the ring. People will get you, they announce you to the people and the fans start going crazy for it. But you're seeing just beautiful women dressed to the nines and you see guys and everybody's drinking with their pint glasses in their hands. And it just felt prestigious. Not only that, it was a very sports-based presentation. You're kind of in the realm of New Japan Pro Wrestling, but even more so, like they had yellow cards and red cards like soccer did. The championship matches were 12 3-minute rounds, and it's just a completely different psychology of pro wrestling. And I would advise anybody out there to go find some German wrestling from the 1980s. If you could find Franz Schumann or Franz van Boyten. Who's the other one that's very good? Mila Zerno. These guys spent so much time, honing their craft in that art form.
Yeah.
Steve Wright, another one. He's another one. He's what? Fabian Eichner. I'm sorry. Forget his name now from.
Oh, right. Yeah. I'm blanking on it now too. I shouldn't be. but Fabian Eichner. Yeah, we all remember.
Steve Wright was his coach.
Yeah.
And working with Fabian, I wrestled him. countless times in the UK, just getting to be a part of that and understanding his cultural influence on Fabian coming to me in England, kind of, it all adds to the cultural beauty of wrestling being different in each city.
It's just so cool to me too, because like it's just so rich in history that you don't really get. And it's like outside of wrestling, there's a thing that happens when you're walking around Europe that you realize how young America is, right? And you realize that like we're still building this culture in America.
Sure.
Like Europe's culture has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years that are built in. We have like 250
Sure,
here. Like
right.
we don't, and I mean, it sounds like in Germany, for example, like you still feel those roots of
Right.
catch
Yeah,
wrestling,
exactly.
like this thing that was there before what we know as professional wrestling, before the Gold Dust Trio came in, before any of that. Like those roots are still there.
Right.
in
And
Europe.
a lot of the people do have their own origin stories. So England, for example, is going to be a melting pot of that.
Yeah.
Because Brian Dixon was promoting, 50 years. He promoted a lot of the William Regal and Fit Finlay stuff. So a lot of these guys, he'd bring in wrestlers from India or South Africa, and everybody has their origin story. It wasn't until I spent some time in England and Europe that I realized how isolated the United States can feel at times. Because no matter what, hours in each direction, you're still in the United States. Whereas in England, at any given time, or no, not England, I'm sorry, mainland Europe, at any given time, you're 2 or 3 hours from the nearest border.
Yes.
So you're different cultures, and it can
Yes.
be drastically different no matter where you go. And I think to me, that's the biggest blessing that wrestling has allotted me.
Yeah.
Is the opportunity to learn and to see different people, different cultures, different foods, different beers, and just take it all in. Because now, at 33 years old, I've had a life experience and almost a wealth of knowledge that your average, athlete doesn't ever get to have.
Especially because like, that level of history doesn't exist. Like the territory system in America is totally gone. Like you couldn't replicate it if you wanted to.
Right.
Like it's over.
It's definitely been valuable to me being such a wrestling nerd, because I knew what to look for. I knew what I wanted to hear and who to ask. So, I spent a lot of time in the car rides with Robbie Brookside, who's a coach at NXT now.
Of course, genius.
And we used to, and people made fun of me for it. I asked the most random, obscure, minuscule questions about why did this referee in the 70s wear a blue bow tie? And people would be like, what the hell? Why are you asking such ridiculous questions? But Robbie would answer everything. Robbie and I would spend hours talking in the car while no one else in the car was talking, just because we were so in depth about random, ridiculous wrestling knowledge that nobody else had a word to say.
Yeah.
And I learned so much from him. I was his last active wrestling tour. I was there for that, so I got to wrestle him a couple times, and it was special because you can understand what a coach is, but to be in there and see them do what they do at their just in their element, I feel like that was something that I'm always going to hold on to.
I think about that when I'm in Orlando sometimes, and I'm looking at the coaches that are in that performance center, and I go like, I hope for the sake of the people there that there are opportunities for like, we're not in class right now, we're not in like wherever. Let me just talk to Robbie Brooks, Shawn Michaels, whoever it is. Like I hope that people do have the opportunity to just sit there and pick those brains. I mean, I remember, for example, like those obscure questions. Like I remember going up to Paul Heyman once and going, Paul, and he was just like, what do you need, Sam? And I go, can I ask you something? You go, of course. I was like, whose idea was it to use Desperado by the Eagles for Terry Funk's music?
Right.
And like, but his face changed. Like he was really happy
Right.
to like go like, yeah, that's a detail. You were paying attention.
I always say now that you cannot, manipulate passion. You cannot BS your way through passion. And it's been so helpful to me being such a wrestling nerd and, learning and applying and then having a conversation, with whether it's Conan in AAA or whether it was, Brookside back then, just your general curiosity.
Yeah.
And you're running it by somebody that was there. They know what normal questions are.
Yeah.
They know what the kind of in-depth questions are. But then they know that your question means you're absolutely insane over this business. That kind of has an element of a little edge you get because of it. And then people know, you know, that there's something about that kid. You know, he's worked well. He's paid attention. And that's kind of what's helped me this far along the way.
Yeah, there's a big difference. You always know the difference between this person is asking me a question because they want FaceTime.
Right.
Because they think they're supposed to ask me a question. But nobody asks about the color of a bow tie.
Right, exactly.
Because they think they need FaceTime. It's because they really want to know why the bow tie color changed.
Exactly. And that goes, you know, again, the same thing happened a few years later in Mexico with CMLL. I would have just random stories, you know, random questions with Negro Casas or some, you know, Atlantis. And I'm self-taught Spanish, right? I learned Spanish in Mexico. So I was able to communicate down there and just, you know, ask these guys any of the questions. But I would end up just bringing up random situations that even the kids my age in the wrestling company would have no idea about.
Right.
They say, why does this random American 6'4" guy know this much about our history? And again, you can't, you know, fake that passion.
Right.
You can't, you know, and that ultimately led to opportunity because they said, this guy is different. He's not like the rest.
But the key too, and people get this wrong, I feel like, the key is that you weren't doing it for the opportunity.
Right.
You were doing it
because I'm
from a real place.
Exactly.
Like it's real passion.
I really, really, really want to learn. Again, I think, you know, a wrestler, the good wrestlers, it's like, you know, baking a stew. Or, you know, you have to take ingredients from everywhere and put them in at the right time. Let them have time to simmer, and you know, and over time they develop. And the next thing you know is you have a stew. You don't know which ingredients you need until you find them. And every question has an ingredient in it. You know, any old match, you can find matches from 1963 right now and have just the tiniest little detail in the finish that hasn't been seen since 1963. Now all of a sudden you bust it out on TikTok. Holy cow, you just blew up the wrestling business.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's so cyclical. And I hope I didn't just give my secret away to everybody. But it's just, it is. There's no, I just think if you're not, you know, you have to learn, you have to develop, and you have to apply knowledge. You know, I could ask all these questions and still go out there and do the same thing I've always done. And you know, it's not going to matter. But when you apply that knowledge and you look at the difference between Sam Adonis of 2012 to Sam Adonis of 2022, and they're completely different animals.
I mean, I would have to imagine, right? Because you get me all jazzed up about like geeky history and stuff like that now. But like when you think about American pro wrestling and the roots of it, it is an amalgamation of all these different styles. Like that's what it always was intended to be. That's what was popularized and everything. But then you're one of the rare people that have actually gone around the world and wrestled these styles. How does one wrap their head around the idea of like, okay, we wrestled in Germany where it's very, very sports based to the extent that they have cards and it's very much treated like a sport. And then we look at CMLL, we look at Triple Eight Lucha, and Lucha is like the opposite end of the spectrum, right? Where it's not any less serious, it's just not
different, completely different.
It's completely different and not meant to be taken as a sport, you know, the way you would hold up a flagrant card here or that. How do you wrap your head around this idea that like, okay, now I have to kind of shift my perspective and gear towards this psychology?
I think from my personal opinion, I think it all ties back into cultural differences. I think I've been very self-aware of making myself what is perceived as an American wrestler. Because there's professional wrestling as an art form, as a sport, but there's also what the rest of the world sees as American wrestling.
And I'm going to guess that it would be difficult to understand what American wrestling is without experiencing what not American wrestling is.
Yes and no, because there's enough of a paper trail behind us that you can point it out.
Okay.
But a lot of people aren't looking at that.
Right.
I always say that, you know, you look back at Japanese wrestling in the 80s, and I love it. I'm obsessed with it. All Japan and New Japan from the 80s, about, in my opinion, as good as it gets. Terry Funk was so beloved because Terry was just the Texas Bronco. He was the you know, badass American that just had the never say die attitude, but he had a very American style. Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen, they were almost reflections of American society just as much as they were professional wrestlers. which is why they succeeded, because the public didn't care whether they liked wrestling or not. They were fascinated by that part of American culture that was coming here. These guys embraced that. I think the same thing could be said about, if an American went to Japan and tried to out pureso the Japanese, it's not going to happen. They're conditioned to learn the way that they learn, and the Japanese fans want their American perception of their what they perceive as American wrestler. Same with Mexico. An American can go down there and try to do as many, cool moves and get a mask. It's not going to be received the same as what a Mexican fan sees as an American wrestler, this 6'4" blonde, obnoxious, pro wrestler.
And I guess the same works in reverse when you think about like why was the cruiserweight division so successful? It's because a bunch of lucha guys came up and did lucha,
right?
Because that's what the American audience wanted to see, this thing that we don't get.
It's in my opinion, it's a beautiful thing. I think a lot of times, the internet as a whole has kind of changed wrestling so much that now we almost have like, what you would call a universal indie style, which is a little bit of high flying, a little bit of submission based, a little bit of MMA style, a little bit, and it's almost like you take everything you like from each style and you put it together and, you have creator wrestler. Mm-hmm. I think there's so many performers doing that now that nobody stands out. Mm-hmm. I think that's just kind of what happens, especially on an independent level. I think what made these wrestlers, it's the time you put in getting good and developing who you are because of these styles, but still staying true to yourself. Mm-hmm. If I can't stress enough, a lot of the world perceives Americans just as loud, obnoxious idiots, period. Not the wrestlers, just as Americans. Lean into that. Yeah. That's what I did. Yeah. My entire, run in Mexico and even in Japan. Ultimo Dragon brought me to Japan for the first time. Mm-hmm. And I said, what's different? What do we do different? Just be you. Just do what you do. And it worked. And you don't have to change completely. You just have to tighten up here and there. If you understand people, you understand what you have to do. Mm-hmm. It's not about wrestling changing. It's not, I need to do more moves. I need to be, hit harder. I need to do more suplexes. It's just, be you and try to figure out your crowd and your culture. Because when you're into that, and again, behind wrestling and maybe horror movies, culture is one of my most, revered just aspects of my life. I love it. I love learning about people. I love to know what makes people tick. And if you can pay attention to that and correlate culture to professional wrestling, you can figure out any crowd and you can almost, thrive in any environment.
So how deep in the game were you when you felt like, okay, I figured out what I do? Because a lot of people take that for granted, but it takes years, I think, for in any type of performance for a person to figure out like, all I have to do is be me, but who are you, right?
I still don't think I know who I am. I think it's, again, perception becoming reality. It's depending on the job I'm being asked to do, because some people assume that I wrestle in Mexico, that I have a fast-paced Lucha Libre style. Mm-hmm. And clearly they don't watch much of my stuff in Mexico, which might be more of a brawling style. But if they book me for this show in Chicago and I'm in a Lucha Libre championship match against Black Taurus, I know what they want to see. So I can't revert back to, and you have to understand it's different per night. You're wrestling for your boss, not for yourself,
right.
And you got to make sure that you're doing what they're asking you to do. If they want you to go out and steal the show in an athletic contest and you go out there and, start beating each other with chairs and tables, you're probably not going to get invited back. Mm-hmm. The way I see it is I've always been able to kind of, try to be a chameleon and adapt the best I can to any situation. And without selling yourself out, you don't have to give up the identity. You keep that identity, and that's still the packaging it comes in. But you have to know the city, the town, the reason, and everything behind it. That's what, to me, in my opinion, what makes a well-rounded performer succeed.
So when you would go to Japan, you went on shorter tours, right? You didn't spend an extended time there?
I did a 4-week tour, which was the All Japan Champion Carnival 2019, which would be, for non-familiar fans, that would be All Japan's version of like the G1 Climax for New Japan. And this tournament goes back to, I think, 1978. It's a long, prestigious tournament. And that was, I want to say 28 matches in 31 days. It was rough. Ooh. It was rough, but it was awesome.
Yes.
And I think, that I was so proud of my time in Japan, because that's, something so many people want to do. We as a wrestling culture has kind of glorified it as, a bucket list situation, and not only was I able to not mark it off the bucket list, it was, higher profile. And to get there, I was so proud and so excited, but to know that they still wanted Sam Adonis. I wasn't coming here. I didn't have to, change. They knew that they knew what they were getting when they brought me. And it was nice. And that's kind of when a lot of it clicked, to understand that, you still have to understand their perception of what an American wrestler is.
Yeah.
Especially now with the modern evolution of WWE and what, the branding of American wrestling has become globally. You have to lean into that. Or you might have to remember that, let's say for a different, different argument's sake, you might say that, Russia hasn't had American wrestling very long at all. So, their perception's clearly going to be different. You have to understand what's happening and why. Japan has such a rich influence, whether it's Brody and Hansen or Hulk Hogan or Ric Flair. They know that, the biggest thing, better than being an actual in-ring technician, the number one thing that always works for Americans in Japan is larger than life personalities. They love that craziness and that just loudness. And you could literally point back at all these people and say, what did they have in common? They were very American. And that kind of is like the secret.
Yeah.
I love Japanese wrestling. I love lucha. I love learning and adding it and adapting my style to it. But I'm also very proud of the fact that, that I learned that secret. It's almost, don't go and try to relearn how to ride the bike. You just got to go do what they expect and a little bit more, and it's going to work out.
Yeah, it doesn't look exactly the same, but it's still a bike. Right. Like it still rides the same. Right. There's pedals on each side.
Exactly.
So you go from the UK then to CMLL. Is that kind of the route?
Yep.
And how does that end up happening?
So Angelico, who's in AEW now, was actually doing a lot of the tours with us in the UK at the time. And he had been back and forth from Mexico at the time, who always kept saying, dude, you need to come to Mexico. You're going to be perfect down there. You need to get down there. And I was dragging my feet. I was very leery. I didn't speak Spanish at the time. I didn't know how to get, I said, well, if you get me some work, I could get it all sorted out. And he goes, it doesn't work like that. Just come and trust me. And that's a lot.
It's a lot.
Well, I didn't go on that part. I waited a while. I waited almost 2 years after that.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't until I had an injury and I was home in Pittsburgh, I was home in Tampa at the time. And I had 2 months until I had to be back into the UK for the next tour. I was the champion of All-Star Wrestling and I needed to get back into shape after being hurt. And Adam said, hey, come down and hang out in Mexico. Just come, get your mind free, come enjoy it. So I ended up down there for 2 weeks, which turned into the better part of 2 years.
Wow.
Because everything happened so quickly. I basically walked in the front door of CMLL, which is not easy to do. And I was accepted in a way, the Spanish came to me so quickly. And I had just one of those rare instances that, got me a lot of attention quick. And they gave me the ball. I ran with it.
So it was what Angelico was saying, where it's like, it doesn't work like I can get you work before, but trust me when I tell you, we'll find the work for you once you're there.
Yes and no. I think he kind of had confidence in me as a friend.
Gotcha.
And as a performer. I think he knew that's going to work there. Let's try it. I don't think he would even tell you that it would have reached the level it reached as fast as it did.
Yeah.
The one thing about CMLL is it was like a sports team where we had to train every week. There was the pro class, and we literally had to run the steps of the arena. I mean, a 16,000 seat arena, up and down the steps to get down in the ring to do an hour and a half of calisthenics just to do 30 minutes of wrestling. And it was brutal. It was the hardest training I've ever done in my life. And any professional athlete would tell you it was difficult, but that's that sickness in me saying, hey, I got to do this. I'm not going to embarrass myself in that ring. So it's sink or swim, and I swam. Next thing you know, 3 or 4 months in, I was literally, being booked in the top of the card. I was all over the country, and I ended up in some 2 pretty historic angles down there.
Yeah, and I'll definitely talk to you about them. But so is that when do you start to feel the confidence? Like, you're basically a kid when you're in FCW, right? You're figuring it out. You get released. I'm sure it's a huge blow to the ego and a shot. I don't even know what I'm going to do going from here. You end up in the UK. You're in the okay, let me figure this out. Was it Europe that made you go I'm confident in myself, or was it succeeding in CMLL that made you go, yeah, I'm doing the right thing?
It was definitely my time in All Star in the UK.
Yes,
because it was just being in the ring that often.
Yeah, sure.
And you develop a confidence, and you understand that you're in control, and you are the person that's leading the band, if you will. And you got that confidence, and I had that just energy in me. I knew I was able to, but All Star had no internet presence. They had no online wrestling, but it was basically a house show circuit.
I mean, that's what I mean by it's old. It's the term old school, I think, is overused.
Yeah,
but it is it's a relic in the most positive sense,
exactly.
Without being insulting. It's a relic in the sense that the way they do things, it's old school.
You're right. There's a guy there, and if I would just advise anybody that can check out James Mason as soon as you can. He's probably now. He'd been wrestling maybe 20 years while I was there, but he doesn't look like much, doesn't look like the biggest, best wrestler on the planet, but he was just incredible. And being in the ring with him and feeling it and knowing it and just saying, oh man, I didn't even get to experience that in FCW. There wasn't anyone there doing that, and you just, once you start realizing you're learning some of the secrets and the tricks of the trade, it cuts to the point where you're ready. When I left England, I knew something big was coming, but I didn't know what was coming, because I almost was presented to Mexico. I was almost a finished product. I can't say I'm finished product, because I hate that. I still wrestlers don't get good till we're 15, 20 years into wrestling. Sure. But when I was down there, I debuted, and it was like, who is this big American? We never saw him. Wow, he looks more experienced than he should for that. I wasn't as well known as my experience level let on, if that made sense.
It makes perfect sense, because think about it. I mean, you're a trainee, for all intents and purposes. Then you disappear, and you get 10,000 hours under everybody's nose,
right?
And then you pop out, and it's like, whoa, what happened here?
And to end up there in a big situation, and then that's when you have to learn different aspects. Now, instead of 100 people every night, or 300 people every night, or 1,000 if we're lucky, I mean, a Friday night we do between 12 and 60,000 people in Mexico. So now you're learning a whole different ball game, and now there's a camera on you every single time.
Yeah,
everywhere you look, there's a camera on you.
Yeah.
So now you're learning. This was a time when I started doing the Donald Trump flag and creating all the chaos. I had so much media time and hours under my belt just in studios doing interviews, being on the Don Lemon show, or having Vice at my apartment, creating this all this content. That also still kind of feeds into the process of being a pro wrestler.
Yeah.
That comes with the territory, and it all comes, you can't ever learn too much.
Right.
You just, keep taking on more and taking on more.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to one day be the WWE champion, you're going to have to do some media interviews,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. And it all comes with it. And I still think, it's funny, because I've had an amazing career. In 15 years. I've been everywhere except the United States. And that's kind of like the most exciting part. It feels like, okay, wow. If Mexico reacted like that 5 years into my career because they thought I was a finished product, what's America going to think when I'm 15 years into this product, And to think that there's so much more of an untapped market for myself personally, that people don't even know what to expect.
Yeah, I mean, you're literally right now, you're the Joker in Tim Burton's Batman movie, saying, wait till they get a load of me.
Exactly. And it's really, really exciting. I'm so happy with where I am with AAA right now. We're still doing, I mean, I'm down there probably once every 3 or 4 weeks. I'm constantly back and forth from Mexico to Pittsburgh. I always say that I'm probably the busiest wrestler in wrestling that's not on WWE money. So I'm traveling, and it's awesome. It's a great experience, but it's constantly, you know, it's just a learning experience. And you just have that sickness in your brain. I need to get more. I just need to keep going, because I'm never going to level off. I'm never going to say, yeah, I was happy with that.
Plus, you start lifting up those rocks and seeing what's under it, and you're like, can I keep lifting up rocks?
Right.
Like, is there just more to learn and more to take in and more and more and more?
Exactly. So, I mean, just the time and experience that I've had thus far has been invaluable. I'm excited now. I'll be debuting for MLW in Philadelphia, which should be airing here in the next couple of weeks. I just think it feels right. Now it doesn't feel, it almost kind of has that, it almost feel like you have a chip on your shoulder now. Okay, I've been ready for a while for this opportunity. Now watch.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited about that, because, you know, I've figured out, I've almost learned instead of just, you know, picking up a cookbook and learning how to bake a pizza, I went to Italy. I learned how to bake my pizza in Italy.
Yeah, how come I've never heard of this pizza maker? Well, he's been making pizza in Italy for the last, you know, 8, 9, 10 years.
All over the place, and then picked up tricks of the trade. And I just feel like, you know, there's so much more to come, and just to apply it here and, you know, make the most of it.
What was it like for you? As you alluded to, you did the Donald Trump supporter gimmick for CMLL, but that was the level of attention that got was astronomical. I mean, it was still, if you YouTube Sam Adonis, that's what's gonna pop up. It's CNN doing a piece on it. It's Vice doing a piece on it. It's all these different global media outlets going, look at what's going on. The top villain in Mexico is this Trump supporter guy, and look at the response it's getting. What was that period of time like for you?
At the time, it was very exciting. I absolutely loved it. I was basking in the attention. I was so happy to have everybody there. And, you know, in 2017, you know, there was not too many pro wrestlers on the planet that had as much publicity as I did.
Yeah.
Hindsight being 2020, I think, you know, that Donald Trump was such a polarizing character. I think a lot of people might have perceived it, you know, as something it was never intended to be. And I think there was some, you know, I didn't ever want to be known as a political character. I never wanted to use that as, you know, kind of the basis of my wrestling skill. It kind of took on a life of its own after a while. And it was, oh, that's the Trump guy. And there'd be some people that would support me because, oh, that's the guy I saw on CNN. And that's not what I wanted. To me, it was just, I was being a heel and dealing with the circumstances I had. It was no different than the Iron Sheik in 1984. You know, you just take advantage of the situation. And I don't know if I would have done it differently. I think there's a lot of people that only know me as that. And again,
here's the problem. You go like this. I wish people knew me as something other than Corey Gray's brother. Okay, you'll be the Trump guy, and you're like, oh, well, that's not exactly what I intended.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like, what can you do? It's exciting. It adds to the ambition I have right now to kind of, you know, break away from that stigma. But again, it's like, you know, there's so much more to it, and I didn't want that attention. I enjoyed it at the time. I think it was good. It was a learning experience. But then again, you know, the bright side of it is a wrestling career is so long. That was still so young. Yes, it was 6, 7 years into my career. And by today's standards, some guys are happy with a 10-year career. But to me, this is a life choice. I'm going to be doing this as long as I can. And that was still fresh, you know? So the experience of the publicity I got, the high profile attention and matches that I got, the learning curve from that was worth it. And I'm still confident enough in what I'm doing and my trajectory currently to know that will just be a small part of my past.
Did it surprise you, as somebody who's as a big a wrestling fan as you are, that understands, you know, you kind of assume that fans understand what this is, right? Wrestling's been around as long as it has been, and we all know what we're watching. There's no work, quote unquote. Everybody's in on it, right? There's a suspension of disbelief involved, and that's what it is. Did it surprise you that you developed the kind of heat where fans that are astute and people that aren't fans that are like, well, I'm not a fan because I know wrestling is fake, right? That those same people could not separate the individual from the character that you were playing?
This was a very, very complicated question because it almost felt like some people didn't. I'm trying to figure out how to say this the best way.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people didn't want to see me for anything but that. And it was almost like an outlet, it's kind of in a way, it gave validity to the job I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
They were living vicariously. They wanted to tell Donald Trump they hated him and they couldn't. So they wanted to tell me. It was almost like, a lot of people just kind of, we hate that guy so bad that they were blinded by the fact that it's still just part of the show.
Right. And if that energy is hitting you in the arena on your way to the ring, perfect.
Exactly. And honestly, I say, quite often, Mexico was great sports about it because, we would start riots. People would get wild and excited. And there'd just be an atmosphere in the air that just people were going crazy for it. And we created what we wanted to create. Mm-hmm. But then at the end of the day, everybody still respected Lucha Libre on the next level. They still said, oh, there's Adonis. Let's go get a picture with him. Can we have an autograph? Because the lucha is beyond the chamba, we call it, the show, the entertainment aspect. The sport is still, what it is. I say the most hostile environment I ever felt was Detroit, Michigan. It was, me and a guy named Gringo Loco from GCW.
Love him.
Wrestled against the Ultimo Dragon and a guy named Josh Mavato. And just the room was just not fun. It was like a scary heat, and the guardrails kept getting closer and closer. And it wasn't, at this point, it's called Ooh La La Lucha, and they had a tequila sponsor. At this point, we're on last. This is probably 11:30, 12 o'clock, in a room full of drunk people. And this, it's in Detroit in 2018. This was not a fun environment. This was not, hey, let's, wind them up. This was, okay, I don't want to be here right now.
Right.
And it felt like, again, that circumstances, again, it being cultural, you take the circumstances of the wrestling event and of the fans themselves and just kind of apply it to where you are. Those fans didn't want to be involved. Had I known that was the entertainment aspect they would have taken from it, if that's how they were going to perceive the event, I probably would have left the flag at home that day.
Yeah.
Because they weren't having fun at that time. They were angry.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a good angry.
Right.
So again, it's trial and error too. Over time you experience more and more and you understand. I love the fact that I'm, at my age, I'm one of the only guys I can, talk to about true, actual heat.
It's territory heat.
They talk about it, and you hear Bully Ray likes to bring it up. There's guys all over podcasts that talk about it, and I can sit down and talk with some of these guys, and they say, yeah, we saw that. That's what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. It's just an amazing. It's a feeling you can't describe. It's cool sometimes where, it's fun. The adrenaline gets you going. But then, when you're on lockdown in Arena, Mexico, and the riot doors are shut because something's going on outside, is it still cool?
Yeah.
And it's been awesome. It's a learning curve. I like knowing that it made me who I am. Mm-hmm. I think, hindsight being 2020, I kind of like, wow, what was that? What are you doing, man? Now that I'm a little bit older and have a little bit more responsibility. But, I think that also adds to the mystique that, makes a good journeyman wrestler. Am I crazy or am I smart?
Yeah.
Yeah,
maybe you don't even know, right? You don't even know.
What if those riot doors got, knocked down? What would I have done?
But you know what? They didn't.
Exactly.
So it's also like, it's so fascinating to me, the lucha culture, where it's just like, because lucha is so over the top. And the reactions are so passionate, and it's so, so many attempts are made to apply it to American wrestling, but it's also the place where the people that you are insulting as this character are also the ones that are so kind of in on this on a very meta level that they can allow themselves to have this vitriol against you.
Right.
And leave it behind. It's just it's very interesting to me.
There's so many. I would probably have to just write down notes for about an hour to just point out all the cool things that make lucha so unique and it's just so different, and how it is such a big part. of their culture in general. There was, while I was there for CMLL, there was a lot of fans that would just assume by the way I looked that I was a luchador. And just the respect you get in the street, and the people were, oh, he's a luchador, and it just, there's an aura to it that I've never felt anything like it in the United States. Maybe you could probably compare it to the way some people look at NFL players. Oh, he's in the NFL. That's kind of what it felt like down there. I don't know for certain. I've definitely been in my fair share of sticky situations, in dangerous areas, if you will. I don't know if maybe that perception is what kept me safe. Maybe we should wait to this guy. Let's pick the next one because he's a luchador.
Interesting.
Maybe. I don't know for sure, but I know that that there's just such a respect that, you're top of the line professional athlete down there. It goes soccer, boxing, wrestling, and it's such a big deal, and to be a part of it and be ingrained in the in the day-to-day sports papers and be mentioned. When I beat Blue Panther for his hair in my first hair versus hair match. Yeah. It was like the next day I was made man. There were people screaming out their car at me. It was like, well, wow. Wait, what happened here? It was printed in the newspaper. I mean, you don't get that stuff. Very seldomly does, does wrestling ever get in the newspaper, even for a human interest piece.
Yeah.
But to get last night's TV results in the paper today would be something special, So that was cool.
And my perception is that the way lucha is appreciated, when you say it's like the top 3 sport, it's you're treated like a professional athlete, but it's not because of the work. You know what I'm saying? Like meaning like you're not working the crowd into thinking that it's something it's not.
Right.
The respect that it's given is for exactly what it is.
The sport.
Yes.
Absolutely. Like I said, I would invite, I don't know how many of your listeners are famous to play for the NHL, NFL, Major League Baseball, or any of that. I would love to get you to get a camera and invite one of these major American sports stars and put them in a lucha class at Arena Mexico for one day. Whether there's no way they're going to tell you it is by any means easy or, oh, that was a good workout. It's hard. And
that sucked.
And this kind of goes back to the whole old school mentality of weeding out the weak. CMLL is such a high level of training that most people never even make it that far. Yeah. So if you just go to your local boxing gym or lucha gym, you see how hard it is. But the one thing that it's kind of different from the United States, which I find fascinating, and I think this gives good insight into why luchadors are able to maintain at such a high level. I think many, many more luchadors perceive Lucha Libre as a means of income than we do as Americans. We perceive it as a hobby. A lot of wrestlers get into wrestling because they like it, and it's what they want to do, and it's what they they can learn it because they loved it their whole life, and they get to kind of for the first couple of years maybe play wrestler until you start taking it seriously and and make something of it. Literally, Mystico back in 2004 when he became the biggest star on the planet, he's from the most dangerous barrio in Mexico City. And he literally, you could use the term American dream, but the Mexican dream, he was the kid that came from nothing that became the biggest star in the country. There's people out there that literally when they know, hey man, I could start making some money for my family here if I go to that training gym every week. And I bet you I could do this. Oh, I'm pretty good too. You're going to work harder. I'm going to put more hours in the gym. Next thing you know, you have a 17-year-old kid who spent 6 years of his life inside a wrestling ring that just they're at a whole next level.
Yeah.
I mean, I've learned so much down there. I just think it's not even misunderstood. It's just there's so much more than anybody can explain. We could do an episode about Lucha Libre for hours. And every time I start speaking, I get off on a tangent about why it's different. I like to say that, a lot of people say Lucha is different. It's, they do it this way here and that way there. I don't think that's the case. I would say American wrestling is about 25% of what Mexican wrestling is. They have what we have plus 3 times more.
That's
just physical technique, just performance art, the Shakespearean aspects, everything about it.
Yeah.
It's what we have times 4.
So how do you make the leap from CMLL to AAA? And is that for those of us that don't know, is that a dramatic, political?
Very dramatic, very political. I was actually supposed to go to AAA 3 years before I did. But I had this crazy ex-girlfriend situation that prevented that, which honestly, I'm saving that story for the book. Another 10 years from now, but man, that was bad. A lot of people were angry with me on both sides of the parties there because there was it just got messy and for no reason.
You mean both
CMLL
and AAA? They were both mad because of stuff going on in your personal life.
Sam was the most hated man in Mexico in the business for a short period of time in Mexico.
Wow.
Yeah. So that luckily that kind of all, with enough time and enough, understanding, certain issues can be put behind you. But I ended up going to AAA last May of 2021. So I made the jump, and it wasn't until I watched the broadcast back that I realized how big of a deal it was. Because to me, I'm so used to just being in the CMLL, their locker rooms, their bubble. It is what it is. It's when you watch Hugo Savinovich announce, "Oh my God, that's Sam Adonis," and they're screaming at the top of their lungs for my entrance. That like, oh man, maybe they like me here, So that was really cool. It was not okay with CMLL.
Sure.
I had been gone for 2 years. I have no obligations to them.
Gotcha.
It's not fair. I've never, tried to hurt them in any way. I'm just, doing my job, getting out there. So they've actually cost me some opportunities with some other bookings because of it. It's really very petty, but it is what it is. I'm grateful for the time I spent there. I learned a lot with them. I wouldn't have the success I had in AAA without my time in there, building my name and learning a lot of the lucha style. But now we're beyond that. Now AAA is a whole nother level from CMLL. We're basically a touring TV company. We're quite similar to WWE. Get all over the country, and now it really feels. When before it was, oh hey, there's that luchador. Now it's, oh hey, there's Sam Adonis. And that change means a lot to me personally, and it feels good, and it makes you realize that the journey is working and paying off, and it's always funny to me because I cannot walk down the streets of Mexico City without being recognized, but in Pittsburgh nobody knows who the hell I am.
Well, it's also like, I think, and this is where I think setting very specific goals is not conducive to reality for people. You know what I mean? I think that the broad goals are good.
Sure.
But like, you don't know what this world is until you are in it.
Right.
Like, there's no way as a kid you would realistically say, well, one day I'm going to get so big in CMLL that they're going to go nuts when I go over to AAA. Like, that'd be like, what are you talking about?
Right.
But that's how it worked out.
It happens in a way. And like, in my particular case, again, it's just being a nerd. It's just having that, sickness for wrestling and just wanting more and that passion. And, the opportunities present themselves because they see that passion, and you never quite know. I never would have guessed Ultimo Dragon brought me to All Japan. My dad came to Arena Mexico. My family came down for one of my shows, and this was for Dragon Mania 2018. And I was feuding with Ultimo Dragon, which is ridiculous if you ask me. So my parents did CMLL on Friday night. Saturday night they came to the Ultimo Dragon show. And after the show's over, we're walking back to the car. And I said, "So Dad, what do you think?" He goes, "Sam, you took off Ultimo Dragon's mask." I said, "Wait, what?" I said, "Well, what show do you like better, last night or tonight?" He goes, "Sam, you took off Ultimo Dragon's mask in Arena Mexico." And I'm like, yeah, I did, didn't I? And that's when it hits, because those moments, you can tell 1996, my brother and I on the couch watching Nitro, seeing Dragon and Liger and Mysterio and these guys just holy cow. And not only that, as a parent, seeing your kids do that, appreciate that. And knowing, as my dad's watched wrestling since the Bruno Sammartino days and seeing everybody on the planet live, for him to know how much that meant to me, to now see it develop into it, or how many, like I said earlier, my mom knows more about most Japanese wrestling than most wrestlers do. Yeah. Because, Christmas time would come, I would have a very specific tape or DVD list or figure list and say, hey, I need the Great Sasuke versus the World compilation. I need the Kenta Kobashi against Kawada from May 7th, 98. And my mom and dad would make it happen.
Yeah, and by the way, you ain't finding this at Sam Goody.
You're right, exactly.
So, like-
Exactly. My mom and dad would make phone calls. They'd find this is the internet days. I was a tape trader, so
Yeah, me
I
too.
had my little bootleg thing going on away from them. But when I knew I had a couple tapes coming my way, they knew exactly what tapes I wanted, you know? So, I mean, they would contact people and make it happen. I don't really believe in luck. I don't like luck. I think luck a lot of times is a cop out, but there are instances of luck. And I know I'm just the biggest thing in my life is luck is just I have the two best parents on the planet.
Yeah.
They've been so supportive. You know, I'm lucky to have been born into a family that we know so much love and support. But not only that understanding and you know they love the wrestling business. My
But
dad,
I mean, they also got to be sitting there, right? And like the pride that your parents must have that they watched Little Matt and Little Sam watching Ultimo Dragon on Nitro, and now on those same Monday nights, one of their little guys is the voice of Monday Night Raw, and their other little guy is taking off Ultimo Dragon's mask. Like, what a ride!
It's funny to me too because I remember specifically, like I have a vision. I don't remember watching the whole broadcast, but I remember when AAA, When Worlds Collide, the pay-per-view in 1994 came out.
Yeah, of course.
I remember sitting in the living room at my parents' house, in my childhood house, the one I moved out of when I was 8. And I remember, why are we sitting down? Wrestling's on. And I'm like, there's no wrestling tonight. Yeah, there is. There's this new wrestling. And Lucha Libre came on. And it was boom. This was, you know, about a year before the Cruiserweight explosion in WCW. And I mean, this was AAA. This was just all, I couldn't believe that there was wrestling out there that I didn't know had big arenas and cool costumes. I had to see more. And, you know, now I still see, you know, so much personal gratification in the time there. It's so funny when you do put it into perspective like that, to know that my dad and my brother were on the couch watching it, you know, and now if you were to see some of the text messages between me and my brother, it's like, wait, is that really what we talk about now? You know, this weird wrestling family business type thing that just kind of, you know, it seemed like a complete pipe dream to childhood Sam and Matt.
Yeah.
Sam
Yeah, I mean,
Cole, sorry.
I remember, yeah, right. I remember where when I first got that tape, the When Worlds Collide tape, my friend taped it on pay-per-view and then like later in the week let me borrow the tape.
Yeah.
Same experience, like mind blown.
Couldn't believe it was real.
Couldn't believe what was going on, that this is all there and all the colors and everything. And it was so cool. Like I got to talk about it on Rey Mysterio's A&E bio.
Right.
And I remember the filmmaker making it. Like, I guess he thought I was just like going to come in and do kind of the WWE sound bites.
Right,
and he was
but
like,
you
know anything about Worlds Collide? I'm like,
yeah.
sit down. let me tell you about this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So now we're at the point where you made your name overseas. You've worked a ton of independent shows in the States, of course, and you've run your own shows in Pittsburgh. But now we're kicking the doors down on the States. How did the MLW deal, connection, whatever, how did that come about?
So I actually work now. The main producer and booker for AAA is Conan, you know, who was a legend from WCW. And he's actually the one that approached me with it. I've been very lucky to have a really good relationship with, you know, him and AAA as an organization right now. But there's still a lot to be done in Mexico. You know, there's still, I am right mid-stride in Mexico, and I'm very proud of that. The MLW situation kind of presented itself in one of those, like, you know, one of those you cannot say no situations, you know, a win-win situation, if you will. I'm able to have my cake and eat it too and do what I do in Mexico and still receive this new opportunity, which is so super exciting because they kind of play off each other. You know, I don't have to reinvent anything. If you see me tomorrow night in Philadelphia at the taping, and it's the first time you see me, you might check out my social media and see a whole, you know, backlog of AAA, or just say next week he's here with this guy. It's just the best possible position. You know, the fan inside me, I really love and admire, you know, the independents in the 80s, like Bruce Brody.
Yeah.
He was always somewhere and always kind of moving around, trying to get himself, you know, to be relevant somewhere. And he made sure his bread was buttered where it needed to be. And that's kind of where I'm lucky to be right now. I just want to be able to show off and, you know, show the American fans what I do, and they can see the best of both worlds between MLW and AAA. And I just still think, you know, right now, I feel like it's just starting to get good. I'm starting to hit a stride where I really truly believe my best days are yet to come.
I think so too. Yeah, and I think you're at this kind of beautiful point where you're going to get to cash in on all these chips you've been collecting, right? Like all these, you just been because you've gone the long road,
right?
And just building and building and
played the
building.
long game.
Yes,
yep,
yep, and that's good.
It is good, and it's a way, and like I said, you just collect experience over time, and I think a lot of people now get stuff. They're in such a rush for everything, and this is not wrestling. This is life in general. Everybody is up for today's instant gratification. I want it now, and you don't appreciate it now.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was supposed to get hired young and get fired young, and learn the hard lessons and be able to be traveling. And it's now going into my 15th year. It's finally feels right, and I feel like I'm right where I need to be. And it is. It's something it's really cool. I wouldn't change a single thing about what I've done thus far. I definitely think it's just it's really exciting to know that there's this much behind the scenes, and there's still so much left to show up front, but nobody really knows what to expect.
You've got it all.
The funny thing is, there's still people that people have a perception based on one performance. Oh, I saw that. He's nothing special. You don't know how deep the tank is, and that's from how much time I spent in Mexico training and just learning from the best.
So what is the extended family life gonna look like for this holiday, right? Because you made me laugh with a tweet that you sent out saying, that your brother-in-law is you're Carmella's brother-in-law. That's the big thing. But like are we? Does everybody get together for the holidays? Are we gonna see? Sam Adonis and Corey Graves and Carmella and then your parents and she comes from a wrestling family too, so that's kind of wild.
So there's I don't know how much trouble I'll get in for full disclosure here, but the Pittsburgh seems to be the gathering center of everything these days, and it has grown a little bit bigger. There's family members from all parties, all brothers and sisters, wives, girlfriends, everybody in between. And the party gets rocking now. So it's kind of cool. We're all at that age where we know exactly, we know how to value the holidays and make it special. We're not all the kids that used to go out every weekend like we used to be. We kind of save it up for the big holidays. So, Carmella's been awesome. Her family's been great to us and to me particularly. It's great to have everybody together for once and spend time in Pittsburgh. And, I don't know. It should be fun this year for sure. I definitely think that the newlyweds will make the best of their first Christmas together.
Yeah, and I also think that that's kind of the beauty of getting older for everyone is that you get to this like you just said, like you start. There's a reason to celebrate, right? You're appreciating the fact
for it.
You're all together, like all of us, and I'm saying all of us.
Yeah,
like. You've been through it,
exactly.
Like the road that it's everybody. It's not
funny. I say that now about it happens every holiday. We end up somewhere either in the kitchen late at night, and we still come clean about stories that we did as kids. This one night I did this at his house, and oh my God, no, you didn't say. And it's so much more special because I feel like over time you do get to bond more, with anybody in your life.
Yeah.
I think half the fun of life is the journey. Most of the fun in life is the journey, and just who you get to spend it with. So it's we've had a great family, great crew of people to surround myself with, and I'm really looking forward to what's next.
Yeah, I drove my parents to Indiana over this COVID summer, so maybe 2 summers ago.
That's 3 now, wasn't it?
Maybe 3 summers ago. I don't know. It seems like a different world ago.
Right?
What a weird time. What a weird time. But yeah, I drove them to Indianapolis, which is like a 12-hour drive. But I'm not going to put my old parents on a flight at the height of this thing. So whatever, let's do it. And the stories that ended up coming up in that car, because my siblings went, we're all adults now, and the wild stuff that my parents went through as kids that they can now share. It's just
and it's funny because you can when you finally start to understand your parents, it all kind of locks into place, and you just everything makes sense.
Yeah,
and you can. It's not even just like I said about the wrestling. You can pick up stories and anecdotes from everybody. You're never done learning. Because life is hard enough as it is. Just ask questions, make friends, talk. I have 2 gentlemen with me, Joe and Johnny here, that we came up from Pittsburgh today. And we spent the last 6 hours in the car just having a blast, laughing, talking. Some people like their earphones and their back of their eyelids not my cup of tea.
No, especially with all the experiences that everybody's been through and all the wrestling there is to talk about and still participate in and everything. I feel like you're at a very good spot. I feel like MLW is at this spot where they're getting all the kind of pieces in place to really kind of make that impact that they're capable of. I feel like AAA is starting to penetrate through and become that global brand that it keeps poking through at. I feel like it's just like it's chipping away. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And them working closely together is awesome as well. A lot of AAA talent is on the MLW events. Aramis, just some of these luchadors are incredible. I mean, the same way we looked at Rey Mysterio and Psychosis in '95, these guys are that, to the 2022 extent. It's a great part of the team. I'm excited and optimistic because Conan presented it in such an awesome way about the potential with both of us working together. Everybody at MLW has been awesome, so I'm really looking forward to. So as we're recording this, tomorrow will be October 30th, which is the taping in Philadelphia. So hopefully by the next time people listen to this or when we air, people will be able to see this and say, "Wow, that was awesome."
That was awesome. Yeah. And where do you want to point people towards to see everything? Obviously, your social media.
Social media is as far as Twitter and Instagram. They're both Real Sam Adonis. Easy as that. I honestly have spent too much time worrying about my wrestling that I have been pretty bad at social media.
Yeah.
I wish I knew how to do it better. I wish
you got to get a clip guy. That's what. Yeah. I feel like there aren't enough wrestlers. You got to look at the way comedians do it. Like, I feel like if you had a clip guy that just kind of, even if they just watched your matches on TV or whatever,
it would be great if I had a full private studio. If I could bring a film guy with me that could just document. And now you're going into documentaries, you're going into travel and food. I mean, that's the money. It's Sam's travels through Mexico City, but. Spanish-speaking, big, tall, blonde American. There's something that has Anthony Bourdain to a new twist to it.
Well, hit up Real Sam Adonis on Instagram or on Twitter if you're like, hey, that sounds like a job I'd like to do. Let's do it.
Come on. I need an amateur filmographer, photographer. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I'm just excited now.
Yeah,
the idea got me excited.
AAA, MLW, everything in between. It's been awesome, man. I appreciate you making the time, and we'll do it again.
Awesome, Sam. Thank you. I appreciate it.
For sure. Thank you.